At my mother-in-law's birthday dinner in Rome, my chair was missing. Not pushed aside, not moved slightly, it was simply not there. 12 place settings surrounded the round table on the rooftop terrace. 12 chairs. 12 glasses already filled with champagne. 12 people settling in, talking, laughing, adjusting napkins. I stood behind my husband, waiting. For a second I thought it was a mistake. Restaurants make mistakes. I scanned the table again, slow this time. My name card was gone. No empty space, no extra chair tucked away. My husband glanced back at me. He smiled, small and quick, like this was mildly amusing. "Oh," he said, letting out a light chuckle, "guess we miscounted." A few people laughed, not loudly, just enough. No one moved. My mother-in-law didn't look surprised. She adjusted her necklace and took her seat at the head of the table. My sister-in-law avoided my eyes. Her husband stared at his plate like it required deep concentration. A waiter froze for half a second, then looked away. I waited for my husband to stand up, to say something, to pull a chair from another table, to do anything. He didn't. I felt heat rise in my chest, sharp and sudden, but my face stayed calm. Too calm. I had spent years learning how to hold my expression steady in rooms like this. "There seems to be a problem," I said evenly. "My seat is missing." My mother-in-law tilted her head. "Oh dear, are you sure?" My husband shrugged again. "It's just one chair, don't make it awkward." That was when I understood. This wasn't an error. This wasn't poor planning. I had personally approved the seating chart that morning. I had counted the chairs myself. I had confirmed the number twice with the restaurant manager. This was deliberate. I looked around the table slowly, one face at a time. No one looked confused. Some looked uncomfortable. A few looked satisfied. My husband looked impatient, as if I was delaying something he wanted finished. I straightened my back. "It seems I'm not family," I said. The words landed heavier than I expected. The laughter stopped. My husband's smile faded, just slightly. "Anna, don't be dramatic," he said. "Sit somewhere else, we'll fix it." But there was nowhere to sit, that was the point. I nodded once, "I'll see myself out." No one stopped me. I turned and walked through the restaurant, past the staff who suddenly found reasons to look busy. The elevator ride down felt longer than it should have. When the doors opened to the street, the night air hit my face, cool and sharp. I didn't cry. Across the street, a small cafe was still open. I sat down, ordered an espresso, and placed my phone on the table. My hands were steady. That surprised me. I opened the event management app tied to my company account. The same account I had used to book the venue. The same account that held every deposit, every confirmation, every guarantee for this week-long celebration. I checked the time. I had 30 minutes. And for the first time that night, I smiled. Before I was standing on a Roman street with no chair waiting for me, I was someone else entirely. I built my life in Boston, quietly and carefully. I didn't come from money. I paid my way through school, worked weekends, took risks when I couldn't afford to fail. By the time I was 30, my event planning company was one of the most trusted names in the city. Corporations, charities, private families with strict expectations, all of them hired me because I didn't make mistakes. I learned early that wealthy people don't forgive errors. They expect perfection and silence. I gave them both. That's how I met my husband. His family hosted a charity gala at a hotel downtown. It was a large event, high profile, with donors who liked things done a very specific way. I handled everything. Seating, lighting, security, timing. When the night ended without a single issue, his mother shook my hand and said, "Very efficient." That was praise coming from her. He found me near the service hallway later that night. He smiled easily, like someone used to being liked. "You're the reason this worked," he said. "My mother will pretend it was her idea, but she knows." I laughed. I thought it was charming that he noticed. After that, the family kept hiring me. Dinners, fundraisers, birthdays, I learned how they operated. Decisions made quietly, power held by his parents, appearances protected at all costs. I was always present, always useful, but never invited into real conversations. When he asked me out, it felt different. He wasn't like them, I told myself. He listened. He asked about my work. He admired that I had built something on my own. The first time his mother met me as more than a vendor, she smiled tightly. "So you're the planner," she said. "Clever girl." Later that night, she asked where my parents lived. When I told her, she nodded slowly, like she had confirmed something she already suspected. The comments came in pieces after that, about my background, about how ambitious I was, about how impressive it was that I had done so well on my own. I ignored the tone. I focused on him. He proposed quickly, faster than I expected. I hesitated for reasons I couldn't fully explain, but I said yes. The wedding was large, elegant, watched closely. His mother had opinions about everything. I compromised more than I should have. He promised me it would get easier after. It didn't. After we were married, I noticed how often decisions were made without me. How his family spoke as if my work was a hobby. How my name was left out of conversations that involved my own life. When I mentioned it to him, he brushed it off. "That's just how they are," he said. "Don't take it personally." But it was personal. It had always been personal. And standing outside that restaurant in Rome, with my espresso cooling in front of me, I finally admitted something I had avoided for years. They had never planned to keep me. They had only planned how to remove me. After the wedding, I learned how carefully their world was divided. There was the public version of my marriage, and then there was the real one. In public, I was introduced as accomplished, capable, impressive. Privately, I was tolerated, watched, corrected. His parents continued to use my company for their events, but something shifted. They questioned choices I had made 100 times before without issue. They changed plans at the last minute and blamed me when things became difficult. At family dinners, my opinions were asked for and then quietly ignored. My husband stayed neutral, always neutral. If his mother criticized something I planned, he stayed silent. If his sister interrupted me mid-sentence, he looked away. Later, when I brought it up, he sighed like I was exhausting him. "You're reading too much into it," he said. "They don't mean anything by it." But meaning didn't matter, pattern did. I noticed how he never directly disagreed with his parents. He would soften things, reframe them, suggest compromises, but he never took my side openly. When his mother said something sharp, he laughed it off. When she excluded me from a conversation, he followed her lead. I started adjusting myself instead, choosing words more carefully, staying quieter, letting things go. The more I adapted, the easier things became for everyone else. At family gatherings, I was seated slightly apart, often next to distant relatives or spouses who didn't speak much. Plans were discussed in front of me without including me. Trips were mentioned casually, as if I already knew, even when I didn't. When I asked about it later, my husband said, "It was last minute." It was always last minute. The first time I realized something was truly wrong was a year into our marriage. We were hosting a dinner at our home. I had planned everything as usual. When guests complimented the evening, his mother smiled and said, "We taught her well." I laughed politely. My husband didn't correct her. That night, I lay awake beside him, staring at the ceiling, wondering when exactly I had become someone who needed to be taught. I kept telling myself things would balance out, that once I was more established in the family, once they trusted me more, it would change. I worked harder. I stayed gracious. I didn't challenge anything directly. Then his mother announced she wanted her 70th birthday celebrated in Rome. Not a party, a week-long event. Multiple locations, private tour, exclusive venues, guests flown in, everything flawless. Everyone turned to me. "This is your specialty," she said. "You'll handle it." It was framed as an honor. It felt like a test. I accepted without hesitation. I told myself this was my chance to prove, once and for all, that I belonged, that I wasn't temporary, that I wasn't replaceable. I began planning immediately, calling contacts, securing venues, reserving accommodations. I treated it like I treated every important event in my career. Professionally, thoroughly, personally invested. I didn't yet understand that the celebration wasn't meant to honor her. It was meant to end me. Planning the Rome celebration took over everything. It wasn't just one dinner. It was a sequence of events spread across a full week, private transfers, exclusive restaurants, a rooftop dinner overlooking the city, wine tastings, guided tour, a final weekend outside Rome at a villa reserved months in advance. I treated it like any high-level assignment. Spreadsheets, backup vendors, contingency clauses. I knew how quickly things could go wrong when money and pride were involved. At first, everything moved smoothly. Venues confirmed, contracts signed, deposits scheduled. My name was on all of it. That was normal. The family preferred it that way. It kept things discreet. Then small issues started appearing. A florist called asking when the deposit would be sent. A driver followed up twice about payment confirmation. The restaurant's finance office requested reassurance before finalizing the tasting menu. None of it was urgent, but it was unusual. When I mentioned it to my husband, he waved it off. International transfers take time, he said. My father's accountant is cautious. I wanted to believe him. I told the vendors everything was fine. In a few cases, I covered deposits myself through my company's credit line. I had done that before for clients waiting on delayed wires. It was temporary, it always was. Except this time, the delays continued. I checked the payment schedules again. Some transfers had been postponed multiple times. Others hadn't been initiated at all. I asked my husband again, more directly. He seemed irritated. Why are you so worried? This is my family. That was the end of the conversation. A few days later, I was working in our study when he left his laptop open. I wasn't snooping. I was looking for a vendor contract I had emailed him earlier. The document wasn't there, but something else was. Financial statements, property valuations, loan summaries. I stared at the screen longer than I should have. Numbers didn't lie, assets heavily leveraged, accounts drained, credit lines maxed out. Properties mortgaged against each other. This wasn't temporary cash flow delay. This was structural. The family wasn't just being cautious. They were running out of money. I closed the laptop carefully when I heard him coming down the hallway. He didn't notice anything. He kissed my cheek, asked if I wanted coffee, and started talking about flight schedules. That night, I lay awake again, listening to him breathe beside me, replaying everything I had seen. The Rome celebration wasn't just expensive, it was reckless. Unless someone else was carrying the risk. I realized then why my name was on every contract, why my company was listed as coordinator and guarantor, why deposits were being delayed but expectations remained high. They weren't worried about paying. They expected me to cover it. The next morning, I confirmed every detail again, every reservation, every clause, every cancellation policy. I didn't confront anyone. I kept planning. And I started paying closer attention. The morning we flew to Rome, I woke up before my alarm. Our bags were already packed, passports lined up on the entry table. The house felt quiet in that tense way it does before a long trip. My husband was in the shower when his phone buzzed on the nightstand. I wouldn't normally look, I had never looked before. But the screen lit up fully, and the message preview was impossible to ignore. Can't wait to see you in Rome, have you told her yet? I stared at the words, my mind slow to catch up. The sender's name was familiar, too familiar. Vanessa. I picked up the phone before I could stop myself. My hands didn't shake, they felt numb. I opened the message thread. There were months of messages. Plans layered over each other, flights coordinated, hotels mentioned casually, conversations about the future spoken with confidence, and then the line that made everything lock into place. The doctor says the baby is healthy, 4 months to go. I sat on the edge of the bed, reading it again, just to be sure I wasn't misreading. 4 months. That meant this hadn't started recently. This had been happening while I planned family dinners, while I smiled at holidays, while I defended him to friends. I took screenshots of everything, each one saved cleanly, deliberately. Then I forwarded them to myself. After that, I deleted the sent notifications from his phone and placed it back exactly where it had been. When he came out of the bathroom, towel around his waist, he smiled at me like nothing had changed. "Ready?" he asked. "Yes," I said. On the drive to the airport, he talked about seating arrangements and arrival times. He reminded me to double-check the restaurant one last time. I nodded and agreed, the way I always did. On the plane, he slept. I watched the clouds pass below us and thought about how carefully my life had been staged, not just by his family, but by him. This wasn't just betrayal, it was coordination. Rome wasn't a coincidence. The timing wasn't a coincidence. The birthday dinner wasn't a coincidence. By the time we landed, I understood why the deposits hadn't been paid, why the documents were in my name, why the divorce papers were already drafted. They weren't just replacing me. They were planning to erase me quietly, cleanly, in a place where I wouldn't make a scene. As we stepped into the arrival terminal, his family gathered together naturally, like a unit. I walked just behind them, pulling my suitcase, listening to their laughter echo off the marble floors. No one noticed when I slowed my pace. No one noticed when I stopped trying to catch up. And no one noticed the moment I decided I would let their plan reach its final act. Just not the ending they expected. Rome greeted us with warm air and gold light, the kind people travel across oceans to photograph. The family stepped out of the terminal together, already talking over one another, already moving as a group. I followed a few steps behind. I had arranged private cars for everyone. Black sedans lined up at the curb, drivers waiting with signs printed neatly in English and Italian. It should have looked impressive. It had taken weeks to coordinate. My mother-in-law glanced at the cars and frowned. "I thought I asked for the hotel service," she said, not looking at me. "These are better," I replied calmly. "They handle diplomatic transfers." She hummed in a way that meant she disagreed, then turned to my father-in-law and started another conversation. The drivers loaded bags. No one acknowledged that I had spoken. The hotel was flawless. Check-in was private. Champagne appeared without being asked for. Keys were handed out smoothly. I watched the staff follow the instructions I had sent weeks earlier, down to the smallest detail. My mother-in-law barely glanced at her itinerary before setting it aside. "We'll just see how we feel," she said. "No need to be so rigid." I smiled and said nothing. Our suite overlooked the city. Fresh flowers filled the room. A bottle of wine my husband loved waited on the table. I had arranged it all personally. His phone rang the moment we stepped inside. "I need to take this," he said, already moving toward the balcony. I watched him close the door behind him. When he came back, his expression was carefully neutral. "Just work," he said. That night, the welcome dinner was supposed to be simple, casual, an easy start to the week. I arrived early, as I always did, to confirm details with the staff. When the family arrived, the seating had changed. I was placed at the far end of the table, separated from my husband by relatives I barely knew. He sat closer to his parents. No one mentioned it, no one questioned it. Conversation flowed around me, stories from past trips, inside jokes, shared memories. I listened, nodding when appropriate, smiling when someone glanced my way. At one point, I mentioned the next day's schedule, a private tour I had arranged months in advance. "Oh, we've decided to do something else," my sister-in-law said quickly. "Family shopping." My mother-in-law smiled. "You wouldn't enjoy it, dear. Why don't you use the time to check on the birthday arrangements?" There it was again, my role clearly defined. Over the next 2 days, the pattern settled in. Breakfasts I wasn't told about, excursions that happened without me, conversations that stopped when I approached. My husband always had a reason, always an explanation that didn't quite fit. I stopped asking questions. On the third morning, he rushed out early, saying his brother needed him. His briefcase was left open on the desk. I didn't hesitate this time. Inside were documents neatly stacked, legal letterhead, dates highlighted, a draft agreement with my name typed cleanly across the top. Divorce papers. Prepared weeks ago. Attached was a typed outline, bullet points, timing notes, a script. Announcement to be made at birthday dinner. Tone, respectful mutual decision. Minimize disruption. I photographed every page. Standing alone in that hotel room, holding my phone, I finally understood my position. I wasn't a wife on this trip. I was an obstacle they were about to remove. After I found the documents, I put everything back exactly where it had been. I didn't confront him, I didn't cry. I didn't slam doors or send messages I couldn't take back. I sat on the edge of the bed for a long time, listening to the sounds of the city outside, letting the shock settle into something colder and clearer. They had planned this carefully. The timing made sense now. Rome was neutral ground, public, elegant, controlled, a place where emotions could be framed as instability and silence could be sold as dignity. The birthday dinner wasn't just a celebration, it was a stage. I was meant to be removed politely. The outline in his briefcase wasn't vague. It specified when he would speak, how long he would talk, what words he would use. It even included suggestions for how his mother would step in afterward to redirect attention. The story would be simple, amicable, regretful. I would be the one who needed space. That afternoon, I met with the restaurant manager as planned. I reviewed the table layout again. 13 seats, 13 place cards, everything confirmed in writing. He assured me it was correct. I thanked him and left. Back at the hotel, the family gathered in the lounge, talking excitedly about dinner. My mother-in-law handed out small envelopes to relatives. Inside were notes thanking them for traveling so far. I noticed there wasn't one for me. My husband stood beside me, his hand resting lightly on my back when others were watching. When they weren't, he stepped away. That night, alone in our suite, I opened my laptop and began organizing what I had collected. Screenshots, statements, emails, contracts. I didn't know exactly how I would use them yet, but I knew I needed them safe. I also reviewed every contract for the week, every clause, every cancellation window, every payment responsibility. I had negotiated these terms myself. I knew where the leverage was. The next morning, I overheard my mother-in-law on the phone in the business center. I hadn't meant to listen, but her voice carried. 12 seats, she said sharply. Not 13. Yes, I'm certain. The arrangement has already been discussed. I stood still, my coffee untouched in my hand. No, she continued. She won't be staying for the dinner, a family matter. That was when the final piece locked into place. The missing chair wasn't a mistake. It wasn't a last-minute change. It was the signal, the public cue that I no longer belonged. I returned to my room and closed the door quietly. I sat at the desk and opened my phone. The event app loaded instantly, familiar and steady. My company's logo filled the screen. For years, I had planned other people's most important moments. I knew how events unraveled when one detail was pulled away. I knew how quickly perfection collapsed without support. They had written their ending already. All I had to do was decide whether I would follow it. I checked the time again. 3 days until the dinner. More than enough. I didn't change my behavior after that. At breakfast, I smiled when spoken to. I confirmed schedules. I reminded vendors of arrival times. I answered questions quickly and professionally. To anyone watching, I was still the same reliable planner, the same accommodating wife. Inside, I was counting hours. The family moved through Rome as a unit. They disappeared for long lunches and returned with shopping bags and stories I wasn't part of. When plans shifted, I was informed afterward, usually as an aside. "Oh, we went ahead without you," my sister-in-law said once. "You were busy anyway." I nodded. I always nodded. My husband grew restless as the dinner approached. He checked his phone often. He avoided being alone with me. When I tried to talk about logistics, he answered vaguely, as if distracted by something more important. At night, he fell asleep quickly. I stayed awake, scrolling through contracts, confirming timelines, rereading clauses I had written myself months earlier. Every agreement was clear. Every reservation tied back to my company, every deposit traceable. They had assumed I was useful, not dangerous. The day before the dinner, I arrived at the restaurant early again. I reviewed the seating chart with the manager in person. 13 names, 13 chairs. I made him print a copy and sign it. He seemed confused by my insistence, but complied. "Everything will be perfect," he said. "I know," I replied. Back at the hotel, I packed a small bag and left it hidden in the closet. Essentials only, documents, chargers, my passport. I chose my dress for the dinner carefully, nothing dramatic. Simple, elegant, appropriate. That evening, my mother-in-law approached me in the lounge. "You've been very quiet," she said. "I hope you're not overwhelmed." "I'm fine," I answered. She studied me for a moment, then smiled. "Good, tomorrow is important." "Yes," I said, "it is." That night, I received a message from my husband. "We'll talk after the dinner." I didn't reply. I already knew what he planned to say. I had read it in his briefcase. I had heard it in his mother's voice. I had seen it in the careful way the family avoided looking at me. They thought silence meant ignorance. They thought my calm meant compliance. The morning of the dinner arrived bright and clear. The city moved below our windows like nothing was about to break. I dressed early and left the room before my husband woke up. In the hotel's business center, I logged into my account and began setting up contingencies. Not cancellations yet, just instructions, just confirmations, just one tap away. When I closed my laptop, my reflection stared back at me from the dark screen. I looked composed, focused, ready. By the time the family gathered to leave for the restaurant, everything was in place. All that remained was the moment they thought they had won. The cars arrived exactly on time. The family gathered in the lobby, dressed carefully, voices light, movements practiced. My mother-in-law stood at the center, accepting compliments, already enjoying the attention. My husband adjusted his jacket and checked his phone one last time. When he saw me, his expression flickered, just for a moment. "You look nice," he said. "So do you," I replied. The drive to the restaurant was short. The city slipped past the windows, lit softly, indifferent to what was about to happen. In the car, conversation stayed shallow. Weather, traffic, the view, no one mentioned seating, no one mentioned tomorrow. The rooftop terrace was exactly as I had planned it. The lights were low, the table centered perfectly, the skyline stretching out behind it. The staff moved with quiet precision. Everything looked effortless. My mother-in-law entered first. Applause rose immediately. She smiled, pleased, already stepping into the role she loved most. Everyone moved toward the table. I followed behind my husband, watching him take his seat beside his mother. I slowed when I reached the space where my chair should have been. There was nothing. No place card, no glass, no chair pulled back. I stood there, visible to everyone, invisible at the same time. Conversation continued for a few seconds before my absence registered. A cousin glanced up, then looked away. My sister-in-law pretended to adjust her napkin. My father-in-law cleared his throat. I waited. "This is strange," I said calmly. "My place setting seems to be missing." My mother-in-law looked up as if noticing me for the first time. "Oh." She scanned the table briefly, then shrugged. "I'm sure it's just a mistake." My husband laughed softly. "Oops," he said, "guess we miscounted." A few people smiled, a few chuckled, no one stood. The waiter hesitated near the edge of the terrace, eyes darting between us. He knew the count. I had confirmed it with him myself. He said nothing. I looked at my husband. He didn't meet my eyes. That was when I felt it settle completely. Not anger, not shock, certainty. This was the moment they had prepared for, the public signal, the controlled humiliation, the beginning of the story they would tell afterward. I straightened my shoulders. "It seems I'm not family," I said. The table went quiet. My husband's smile dropped. "Anna, don't do this," he said. "We can fix it." But he didn't move. "I'll see myself out," I said. I turned and walked away. No one followed. No one called my name. The sound of chairs shifting resumed behind me as I reached the elevator. Inside, the doors closed slowly. I watched my reflection in the mirrored wall. My hands were steady, my breathing even. When the doors opened to the street, I didn't hesitate. Across the road, the cafe was still there. Same table, same chair. I sat down, ordered an espresso, and placed my phone on the table. I checked the time. 29 minutes. Enough, the espresso arrived quickly. I wrapped my hands around the cup and opened my phone. The app loaded without delay. Every event, every reservation, every vendor, all of it sat there, waiting for instructions that only one person had the authority to give. Me. I didn't rush. I never rushed important work. First, the restaurant. I opened the contract and scrolled to the payment section. My company was listed as coordinator and guarantor. The deposit had been placed through my account. I sent a short message to the manager, one we had already discussed weeks ago as a contingency. Please proceed with the alternative payment protocol. I'll confirm in writing. Next, the vineyard scheduled for the following day. I called directly. The woman on the line recognized my name immediately. She sounded apologetic when I explained the plans had changed. No problem, she said. We'll release the booking. I authorized the refund back to my business account. Then the private guide. Then the transport company. Then the villa reserved for the weekend outside the city. Each cancellation was clean, professional, logged, deposits reversed. With every confirmation email, my chest felt lighter. My phone began to vibrate. A message from my husband appeared first. Where did you go? I ignored it. Another message followed. This isn't funny, come back. I continued working. I canceled the yacht excursion. I released the security detail. I paused the remaining hotel services scheduled beyond that night. Each action was within my rights. Each one had been agreed to in writing. The app timestamped everything. My phone rang. I declined the call. Then another. Then another. I checked the time again. 17 minutes left. Across the street, I could see the terrace. The table was visible through the open space, glasses raised, smiles still in place. They had no idea yet. I received a new message. The hotel just called. They're asking about tomorrow. I took a sip of my espresso and replied calmly. All arrangements made through my company have been canceled. The typing bubble appeared immediately, then disappeared. Then my phone rang again. I let it ring. A waiter crossed the terrace and spoke to the manager. The manager's posture changed slightly. He nodded once and pulled out a tablet. I watched my mother-in-law lift her glass, mid-toast. My phone buzzed again. What did you do? I didn't answer. I paid the bill and stood, smoothed my dress, walked back across the street with measured steps. As I entered through the service entrance, the manager met me. His face was serious. They will need to provide payment to continue, he said quietly. I understand, I replied. Please give them a few minutes. From the side alcove, I could see everything. Confusion spread first, then tension. My father-in-law leaned forward, speaking sharply. My sister-in-law checked her phone. My husband stared at the screen in his hand, color draining from his face. 28 minutes after I left the table, the celebration began to collapse. Exactly on schedule, the manager approached the table with practiced calm. He leaned in toward my father-in-law first, speaking quietly, respectfully. From my place near the service entrance, I couldn't hear the words, but I saw the reaction. Confusion flickered across his face, then irritation. He reached for his wallet. The manager shook his head gently and showed him the tablet. My mother-in-law stopped smiling. She set her glass down slowly, the sound sharper than it should have been. What is going on? She asked, her voice carrying just enough to draw attention without sounding alarmed. My father-in-law spoke again, this time more urgently. The manager remained composed. He pointed to the screen, then gestured subtly toward the side of the terrace. Around them, other diners began to notice. Conversations at nearby tables slowed. Heads turned. A waiter paused mid-step. My husband was staring at his phone now, unmoving. I knew what he was reading. The confirmations, the timestamps, the proof that everything was already done. My phone buzzed in my hand. Anna, answer me. I didn't. At the table, my mother-in-law's voice sharpened. This is ridiculous. We are in the middle of dinner. I understand, the manager replied, still polite. But the payment authorization linked to this reservation has been withdrawn. Withdrawn. That word landed. My sister-in-law leaned toward my husband, whispering urgently. He stood up so suddenly his chair scraped loudly against the floor. Excuse me, he said, already stepping away from the table. He pulled out his phone and called again. This time I answered. What did you do? He hissed, keeping his voice low. Are you trying to embarrass us? I didn't do anything, I said calmly. I stopped doing something. You need to fix this, right now. I'm not responsible for family celebrations, I replied. Remember. There was a pause, I could hear his breathing change. "Where are you?" he asked. "Close," I said, "close enough to watch." Behind him, the table had gone completely silent. My mother-in-law's composure was cracking. She clutched her napkin tightly, eyes darting from the manager to my father-in-law. "What is the problem?" she demanded. The manager straightened. "Unless a new method of payment is provided immediately, we'll need to pause service." A few guests at nearby tables openly stared now. My husband turned away from the table, lowering his voice. "Anna, please, we can talk about this later, just come back." "I already did," I said. I stepped out of the alcove. 12 pairs of eyes turned toward me at once. Shock moved through the table like a wave. My mother-in-law's face drained of color. My father-in-law stood halfway out of his chair. My sister-in-law looked furious. "You," my mother-in-law said, her voice trembling, "you did this." I met her gaze calmly. "Yes." The silence that followed was heavier than the noise had been. And for the first time that night, they understood something had gone very wrong. My husband moved toward me, stopping a few steps away like he wasn't sure what I might do next. "Anna," he said through clenched teeth, "you need to stop this, now." The manager waited nearby, giving us the appearance of privacy, while the entire terrace listened anyway. "I already stopped," I said. "That's the problem." My husband looked past me toward the table. His parents were frozen in place, their faces tight, their posture rigid. This was not how they operated. They controlled rooms, they did not lose them. He lowered his voice. "You're humiliating my mother." I nodded, yes. His eyes widened slightly, like he hadn't expected me to admit it. "You can't just cancel things," he said. "Do you know what this does to us?" "I do," I replied. "I planned it." His phone buzzed again. He looked down, then back up at me, panic starting to show through the anger. "The hotel is asking for guarantees," he said. "The villa says the reservation is gone, the vineyard canceled." "That's correct." He ran a hand through his hair. "Why are you doing this?" I looked at him carefully. The man I had married stood in front of me, but now I saw him clearly. Not confused, not betrayed, afraid. "You already know why," I said. He swallowed. "We were going to talk after dinner." "No," I said. "You were going to speak. I was going to disappear." Behind us, my mother-in-law stood up. "This is unacceptable," she said loudly. "You have no right." I turned to her. "Every contract is in my name," I said. "Every deposit was paid through my company. I have every right." Her mouth opened, then closed. She wasn't used to being challenged publicly, especially not by me. My husband stepped closer. "We can still fix this," he said quickly. "You don't understand everything." "I understand enough," I replied. I took out my phone and opened one of the screenshots. I didn't show it to the table. I showed it only to him. His face went pale. "You went through my phone," he whispered. "You left it unlocked," I said, "just like you left your briefcase unlocked." His breath caught. "You know," he said quietly. "Yes," I replied. "About Vanessa, about the baby, about the papers, about the script." For a moment, he looked like he might say something else, an excuse, a denial. Instead, he said nothing. My mother-in-law stepped toward us, her voice sharp. "What are you talking about?" "This," I said, turning slightly so she could hear, "was never a celebration. It was an exit." Her eyes flicked to her son. "Is that true?" she asked. He didn't answer. That was all the answer she needed. The terrace buzzed with low murmurs now. Other diners were no longer pretending not to watch. Phones were being lifted discreetly. Whispers spread. My husband looked at me again, desperation replacing anger. "Please," he said, "just stop, we'll talk, I promise." I met his eyes. "You already had your plan," I said. "This is mine." And with that, the last piece of their control slipped away. My mother-in-law recovered first. She always did. "This conversation is not appropriate," she said sharply, lifting her chin. "We are in public." "Yes," I replied. "You chose the setting." My father-in-law finally spoke. His voice was low, controlled, but strained. "Anna, let's step aside." "We already did," I said. "You planned it that way." The manager cleared his throat. "I'm sorry," he said gently, "but we do need a decision." My husband turned to his parents. I'll handle it, he said too quickly. He reached for his wallet again, then stopped. He looked at his father. His father shook his head once. Subtle, final. My mother-in-law's eyes darted around the terrace. She noticed the attention now. Nearby tables had gone quiet. A couple across the way openly stared. Someone's phone camera caught the light. This is humiliating, she hissed. I nodded. It is. She turned on me fully. You planned this. Yes. You did this to punish us. No, I said. I did this because you already punished me. My husband stepped between us. Enough, he said, his voice breaking. Anna, please come back to the hotel. We'll sort everything out. Sort what out? I asked. The affair, the baby, the papers you were going to read after dessert. His jaw tightened. He didn't answer. That silence was louder than anything I could have said. My sister-in-law stood abruptly. This is insane, she snapped. You're destroying the family. I looked at her. I wasn't the one hiding assets, I said, or drafting divorce papers in secret, or arranging a missing chair. Her mouth fell open. My father-in-law's composure cracked then. He leaned heavily on the table, his face flushed. We can still salvage this, he said. Name what you want. I shook my head. That conversation is over. The manager returned, this time with 2 staff members. If we don't receive authorization, he said, we'll need to end service. End service? The phrase rippled through the table. My mother-in-law grabbed her purse. This is outrageous, she said. We are leaving. Chairs scraped loudly. Glasses rattled. The elegance of the evening collapsed into sharp movements and raised voices. People stared openly now. There was no dignity left to protect. My husband lingered, torn between following them and staying. He looked at me one last time. You didn't have to do this, he said quietly. Yes, I replied, I did. He turned and followed his family toward the elevator, shoulders hunched, head down. I remained where I was. When the terrace finally cleared, the manager approached me again. Are you all right? He asked. I am, I said. And for the first time since the trip began, it was true. The terrace felt different once they were gone. The noise drained away slowly, like water receding. Other diners returned to their conversations, though some still glanced in my direction, curiosity lingering. The staff moved efficiently, resetting the space as if nothing unusual had happened. The manager offered to call a car. I declined. I'll walk, I said. I left the restaurant alone, stepping into the narrow street below. The city moved on around me. Scooters passed. Couples laughed. Someone argued loudly over a phone call. Rome didn't pause for personal disasters. I walked without a plan, letting the night air cool my skin. My phone buzzed constantly in my hand. Messages stacked up without being opened. When I finally stopped, it was on a small bridge overlooking the river. I leaned against the stone railing and looked down at the water moving steadily beneath me. I thought about how carefully they had arranged everything. The seating, the timing, the silence. They had counted on me reacting the way I always had, quietly, politely, privately. Instead, I had followed their structure and removed myself from it. My phone rang again. I answered without checking the name. You need to come back, my husband said immediately. His voice was hoarse. This has gone too far. It went too far before tonight, I replied. The hotel is demanding payment, he said. The concierge says our guarantees were withdrawn. Yes. You're hurting everyone. No, I said. I stopped protecting everyone. There was a pause, then his voice dropped. They know, he said. Who? My parents, he said. About Vanessa, about the baby. I closed my eyes briefly. Good. They're furious, he continued. Not at me, at you. I smiled faintly. That figures. You've destroyed everything, he said. Do you understand what happens next? Yes, I replied. You try to fix it. Silence stretched between us. I need you to come back, he said finally. We can still talk. There's nothing left to discuss, I said. I ended the call and put my phone away. I stood there longer than I meant to, listening to the river, letting the finality sink in. For years, my life had been structured around anticipation, of approval, of acceptance, of the right moment to speak. Now, there was nothing to wait for. When I returned to the hotel later that night, the lobby felt tense. Staff moved carefully. The concierge avoided my eyes. I took the elevator up alone. In the suite, my husband's belongings were scattered, drawers open, papers half-packed. He had already started preparing for a different future. I slept on the edge of the bed, fully dressed, my bag within reach. At dawn, I booked a flight. One way, I woke before the alarm, the room still dim and quiet. For a moment, I didn't remember where I was. Then the details returned quickly. The hotel, the terrace, the missing chair, the way my husband's voice had sounded when everything finally slipped out of his control. I sat up and checked my phone. 23 unread messages, missed calls stacked on top of each other. I didn't open any of them. Instead, I dressed carefully, choosing clothes that didn't draw attention. I packed the rest of my things methodically. No rush, no hesitation. Everything I needed fit easily. When I stepped into the hallway, the door across from ours opened. My husband stood there, already dressed, eyes red, hair uncombed. "We need to talk," he said. "I'm leaving," I replied. He looked past me, as if expecting someone else to appear. "You can't just walk away." "I already did," I said. His jaw tightened. "Do you have any idea what last night did to my family?" "Yes." "The hotel is demanding full payment," he said. "The villa is gone. The drivers won't confirm anything. People are calling my parents." "That's what happens when arrangements collapse," I said. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "If this becomes public, it will destroy us." I looked at him then, really looked. The fear in his face wasn't about me, it was about exposure. "You already planned for this to be public," I said, "just not like this." He swallowed. "We were going to be discreet." I nodded, so was I. The elevator doors opened behind me. I stepped inside. He followed, pressing the button frantically. "Anna, wait," he said. "We can negotiate." "About what?" He hesitated. "The documents." I smiled faintly. "Those stay where they are." The elevator descended in silence. In the lobby, his parents were already there. My mother-in-law stood rigidly near the desk, her voice clipped and sharp as she argued with the concierge. My father-in-law stared straight ahead, his expression hollow. She turned when she saw me. "You," she said, venom slipping through the word. "You've done enough damage." I met her gaze. "You plan to do worse." She scoffed. "You'll regret this." "Maybe," I said, "but not today." I walked past them, through the glass doors, and out into the morning air. The car I had booked waited at the curb. As I slid into the back seat, my phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't my husband. It was my lawyer. "We need to talk, immediately." I closed my eyes as the car pulled away from the hotel. The aftermath had begun. The drive to the airport was quiet. Rome passed by the window in fragments, buildings, intersections, people starting their day. The driver didn't speak. I appreciated that. I stared straight ahead, my phone resting face down in my lap. It buzzed again and again. I didn't answer. At the airport, everything moved efficiently. Boarding pass, security, lounge access I had booked without thinking. I sat near the window with a glass of water and finally checked the message from my lawyer. "Do not speak to them. Do not respond to any requests. We'll discuss options when you land." I replied with a single word. "Understood." Then I turned my phone back over. New messages kept arriving. My sister-in-law first, angry, accusatory, telling me I had gone too far, that I had embarrassed everyone, that this would follow me. My father-in-law next, shorter, controlled, asking to speak privately, suggesting we clear misunderstandings. Then my mother-in-law. Her message was longer than I expected. She accused me of being vindictive, of proving what she had always suspected. She said I was unstable, dramatic, ungrateful for everything the family had given me. She ended with a warning that I would never be welcomed anywhere that mattered again. I read it once and deleted it. My husband's messages were the worst. They shifted in tone every few minutes. Anger, panic, bargaining, guilt. He said his father's health wasn't good. He said investors were asking questions. He said the hotel had demanded collateral to cover the dinner. He said people were watching. He said he loved me. That one made me pause. I reread it, then scrolled back through months of silence, avoidance, and planning. I locked the phone and slipped it into my bag. When boarding was called, I stood and joined the line. No one looked at me twice. No one knew what I had just walked away from. On the plane, I took my seat and fastened the belt. As the aircraft taxied, my phone buzzed one last time before I switched it off. A message from my husband. "Please just talk to me, we can still fix this." I powered the phone down. As the plane lifted off, the city dropped away beneath us. The river curved like a thin line of silver. The rooftops blurred into distance. For years, I had stayed in rooms where I wasn't wanted because leaving felt like failure. Now, leaving felt like the first decision I had made entirely on my own. I closed my eyes as the seatbelt light went off. There was nothing left for me in Rome. And there was no reason to look back. By the time the plane landed, my phone felt heavier than it had before. I didn't turn it on immediately. I waited until I was through immigration, until my bag was in my hand, until I was sitting alone in the back of another car. Only then did I press the button. The screen filled instantly. Voicemails, messages, emails, some from people I recognized, some from numbers I didn't. The situation had already moved beyond the family. My lawyer called as soon as the phone reconnected. "They're scrambling," she said without preamble. "Your husband's parents are trying to contain the damage." "Financial?" I asked. "Yes, and social," she replied. "Those contracts you canceled exposed more than you realized." She explained quickly. Vendors had talked. Payment delays had raised questions. The restaurant incident hadn't stayed private. In circles like theirs, silence depended on money arriving on time. When it didn't, people noticed. "They're worried you'll cooperate," she added. "With whom?" I asked. "Anyone," she said. "Regulators, creditors, attorneys." I leaned my head back against the seat. "I haven't spoken to anyone." "Good," she replied. "Keep it that way." When I arrived at my apartment, the building felt unfamiliar. I had lived there before the marriage, but it no longer felt like a pause between things. It felt final. Inside, the silence was complete. I unpacked slowly, hung clothes, placed documents in a locked drawer, set my laptop on the desk. Everything I owned was mine again, unshared, unquestioned. That night, I slept deeply for the first time in weeks. The next morning, my husband appeared at the door. I hadn't expected him so soon. He looked different, smaller somehow. His clothes were wrinkled, his confidence gone. "We need to talk," he said, the same words he always used. I didn't invite him in. I stepped outside and closed the door behind me. "What do you want?" I asked. "They're investigating," he said. "My father's accounts, the investment firm." I said nothing. "They think you triggered it," he continued. "The cancellations, the attention." "I didn't call anyone," I replied. "I know," he said quickly, "but they don't." He ran a hand over his face. "I need those documents." "No," I said. "If you turn them over," he said, "we can settle quietly. You'll be protected." I looked at him. "From what?" He hesitated. "From being pulled into it." I smiled slightly. "I was already pulled in, you just didn't think I noticed." His shoulders slumped. "They want to make you the problem," he said quietly. "I know," I replied. He stepped closer. "Please, just give me the files." I shook my head. "You already decided who mattered. This is just the consequence." He stood there for a long moment, then nodded once. "I should go," he said. "Yes," I agreed. As he walked away, I felt no urge to stop him. The last tie loosened quietly, without drama. Inside, my phone buzzed again. A new message from my lawyer. "They've started blaming each other." I sat down at my desk, opened my laptop, and began organizing files. Not to send. Just to be ready. The pressure didn't come all at once. It arrived in pieces. First, it was the calls my lawyer intercepted. Requests framed as concerns. Invitations to clarify misunderstandings. Each one carefully worded, each one designed to pull me into a conversation where control could be reclaimed. I declined all of them. Then it was the leaks, quiet ones. A story passed along to explain why the Rome dinner had collapsed. I was described as emotional, difficult, overwhelmed by pressure. Someone who had acted impulsively and regretted it later. The problem was that the story didn't hold. Too many vendors had contracts. Too many confirmations carried my name. Too many people had seen the seating chart and the payment withdrawals in real time. This wasn't a tantrum. It was a sequence. My lawyer called me late one evening. "They're turning on each other," she said. "Your husband's parents are blaming him, he's blaming them. Everyone's trying to establish distance." I closed my eyes briefly. "And me?" "They'd like you quiet," she replied, "preferably invisible." I smiled. "That won't work." The next development came through an unexpected channel. A former client called me, someone I trusted, someone who had connections I didn't ask about. "I heard your name," she said carefully, in a conversation that wasn't meant to include it. I listened without interrupting. "They're worried you'll cooperate if things escalate," she continued. "Not because you're angry, because you're organized." That night, my husband called again. I almost didn't answer, almost. "What do you want?" I asked. His voice was flat, exhausted. "They're preparing to say you acted alone, that you exceeded authority, that you misunderstood the arrangements." I leaned back in my chair. "And you?" "I didn't correct them," he admitted. "Of course you didn't. They want you discredited before anything formal happens," he said. "If they can make you unreliable, nothing you have matters." I considered that for a moment. "You already tried that," I said, "with a missing chair." There was silence on the line. "I never thought it would go this far," he said finally. "That's because you never thought I'd move," I replied. He exhaled slowly. "What are you going to do?" "I'm going to let you finish," I said, "all of you." After the call ended, I opened a folder on my computer labeled simply Timeline. Inside were dates, screenshots, contracts, messages, not opinions, not interpretations, just sequences. I didn't send anything. I didn't threaten anyone. I waited. Because the thing about carefully built facades is this. They don't collapse from one strike. They collapse when the people inside stop protecting each other. The first sign was quiet. A name disappeared from a board listing. No announcement, no explanation, just a vacancy where my father-in-law's position had been. Then a fundraiser was postponed, then another, invitations were revised, guest lists shortened, donors asked for updates that never came. My lawyer kept me informed, but only in facts. No speculation, no emotion. "The firm's accounts are under review," she said during one call. "Nothing formal yet, but enough activity to make people nervous." Nervous people talk. A former vendor forwarded me an email by mistake. It was brief and careful, asking for advance payment given recent events. Another followed from a hotel group declining future reservations without prepayment. The protection they once enjoyed was thinning. My husband stopped calling. That worried me more than his panic ever had. 2 weeks later, he showed up again. He looked worse, thinner. His voice had lost its confidence completely. "They're restructuring," he said, sitting across from me without being invited. "The firm, the trusts, everything." I said nothing. "They want to separate liability," he continued. "Create distance." "From whom?" I asked. He hesitated. "From me, from you, from each other." I nodded slowly. "They're telling people you handled the Rome arrangements independently," he said, "that you exceeded authority." "And you're letting them," I replied. He dropped his gaze. "I don't know how to stop it." That was the truth. He had never known how. "Do they know what you did?" I asked. "Yes," he said quietly. "About Vanessa, about the timing." "And," I pressed. "They don't care," he admitted. "They care about exposure." I stood up then, not in anger, just to signal the conversation was ending. "This is what happens," I said, "when loyalty is conditional." He looked up at me, eyes red. "What do you want?" I considered the question carefully. "I want distance," I said. "Legal, financial, personal." He nodded once. "They'll agree." "I know," I replied. A week later, the proposal arrived through lawyers. Clean, quiet, generous enough to prevent questions, structured to end things quickly. I reviewed it without rushing. And then I accepted. Not because they deserved peace. Because I did. The story they told afterward was vague, muted, carefully blurred. No one mentioned Rome directly, no one mentioned the chair. But in the circles that mattered, people understood. I went back to work. Clients returned, some cautiously, some eagerly. Discretion had become my most valuable credential. The family that once controlled every room I entered now avoided my name entirely. That was fine. I didn't need recognition. I had already taken what mattered. The divorce finalized without noise. No hearings, no statements, no public acknowledgments. Papers were signed, accounts separated, names untangled. Everything moved quickly once the terms were accepted. Speed mattered to them. Silence mattered more. I moved apartments. Not far, just enough to feel the difference. Smaller space, fewer rooms, no shared furniture, nothing that carried history I didn't choose. I kept what was mine and left the rest untouched. My husband didn't try to contact me again. I heard things anyway. The firm lost clients quietly, long-standing ones, the kind that never complained, just withdrew. A charity event was canceled with little notice. A board seat remained empty longer than expected. People stopped asking questions aloud and started asking them privately. No one asked me anything. That was the part they hadn't anticipated. I returned to work fully, not cautiously, not defensively, just steadily. Calls came in, then referrals, then requests that assumed discretion without asking for it. I didn't mention Rome, I didn't need to. Months later, I found myself back in Italy for work. Different city, different client, different table. The dinner was small, balanced, everyone seated, everyone accounted for. I arrived early, reviewed details, then took my place without hesitation. No one watched me closely. No one measured my reaction. Halfway through the meal, someone mentioned Rome casually. A rooftop restaurant, a story they'd heard, a family who had lost control of a room they thought belonged to them. I didn't comment. I finished my drink and excused myself when the night ended, walking back through streets that felt neutral now. No memory attached, no weight. Back at the hotel, I stood at the window for a moment, looking out over the lights below. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel vindicated. I felt clear. For years, I had stayed where I wasn't protected because leaving felt like failure. I had accepted conditional belonging because it came wrapped in comfort and appearances. All it took was one missing chair to show me exactly where I stood. And once I knew that, everything else became simple. I turned off the light, closed the curtain, and went asleep. Alone, unobserved, and finally uncontained. You have reached the end of the text.